Julian here. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make hard melodic techno. I've recently learned a lot of new stuff. I've been working hard in the studio trying to put together some new stuff for you guys. In this video, I'm going to be showing you all the new stuff that I've learned. To go along with this video, you can get this full project file, the whole arrangement, the samples, the MIDI, the presets, literally everything is available right at the top of the description on my website. It's just $5, super affordable. So this means you can get one of the best templates on the market for this style. Definitely one of the closest ones I've ever heard to these tracks that we all love for just $5. It's super accessible, but you can immediately take your tracks to the next level using this template. So definitely don't miss out. Link is at the top of the description, and let's dive in. So we're at 142 BPM. The first thing we have up here is the kick. So you can see we've got a nice, just like punchy kick. Not over processed. And then we also have a rumble. Now this rumble is being made a little bit different. So this is an acoustic tom, and I've shown you a little bit about this method before, but I think I've really dialed it in here to get the right sound like you want. So what this is as you know, a lot of times like when you make a rumble, you'll take a kick and have it just do 16th notes, and that'll give you that low rumbly bass. Same technique here, except we're using a tom, like a more like that, and you can hear it gives you a different rumble. It's really nice actually. So what it is it's just that, but then I'm using a low pass filter. You can actually go without the low pass if you want, like that can work as well. But here I found this worked better for the groove. And then there's just a little bit of drum bus on there. You can see I blended it, but it's just adding a little bit of boom. And then we have this being sidechained to the kick. We have a little high pass at 22 hertz, cutting out the stuff that you wouldn't be able to hear that would kind of get in the way of the headroom of the track. And then we have a utility converting this to mono. And then on the group, the kick group here, so we got two things. We have a limiter. So this is a new thing as well. I've shown this maybe a little bit in the past, but again, you can see it's the cleanest it's ever been here. So it's just giving this a little boost with the limiter. And what this does is you can see we're not clipping. It's not to save any clipping, but if you listen, you can see like, so here's without it, and then with it. So again, without it, it's not like it's a tiny kick. It's very hard hitting and punchy, but then when you just add that extra limiter on top, it's just like the extra glue to make it fit together. And then we also have an EQ8 here. And what this is doing is it's cutting at 35 hertz all throughout. And then at this one little transition, see, we just get that little automation there. So this is cutting some of the bass. It kind of makes the bass a bit more airy. And if I turn this off, and then I'll turn it on in a second. So here's without it. And then with it. See how everything, it's very subtle, but everything will just sort of sit on top of the kick a bit better. That's the purpose of this. It actually helps the groove. It's a really subtle thing. But I learned this when I started. I was talking about this in my Discord yesterday actually. It's like, when I was first looking at these on the spectrum, when I was studying reference tracks, I noticed actually that a lot of them, like the bass, the lowest it'll get is like 40 hertz, 30 hertz, So this is happening in a lot of tracks. And I think not only does it cut out the stuff that you wouldn't really hear that would get in the way of the headroom, but also, again, it just makes that bass a little bit more airy. And it's one of those things where, like, if you don't do it and then you listen to a reference track and then compare it to yours, you're going to go, oh, why doesn't my bass quite hit like that? But then as soon as you do it, it's like, there it is. So that's what that's doing there. Then we have the hi-hat. So it's two layers. You can see no processing, super clean. It's just a nice fat 909 hi-hat. And then more of like a shaker. That adds some punch to the 909. Speaking of 909s, we have a 909 clap. And this is a new kind of way of doing this as well. So you can see what is happening here is we're turning this clap. Like if I play you the original sample, you'll be like, actually probably kind of surprised by how. So that's the original clap that we're using here. and then we're turning it into this. So what you do is you pitch it down a bit, and then it's like a very small amount of reverb going into a distortion. I like using pedal. You could use really any distortion though, and they're all going to give you slightly different textures. This is one of those sounds where you're not going to be like, okay, I'm going to put pedal on here and put it right on the distort mode and turn the mids up, and that's going to sound exactly like the sound that I hear in my head. And then you do it and it sounds exactly like what you hear in your head. This is not one of those sounds. This is one of those sounds where you know that if you pitch down the 909 clap and put it into the distortion, you're going to get some kind of a cool texture out of that. And then what you're doing is you're essentially going to drop that distortion on there, start working with it, and kind of like find the sound. Like, it's going to come more as like a happy accident, like finding something that sounds good, rather than like, oh, okay, like I'm going to make exactly the sound I hear in my head. Because if you try to do that with something like this, where like distortion just never sounds the same, even if you have two different 909 clap samples, they're gonna hit it slightly different. So like, yeah, you really have to approach it more so from like, you know that this process is gonna produce a certain result, and you're just gonna play around until it sounds good and until it sits well with the groove. So then we have this Rave loop. This is one of mine from my hard Rave techno kick and bass and drum grooves. So it's just one of mine. Again, it just plays through. You can see it's pretty loud. It sits nicely under the groove if you get the level right. Like, even though that's kind of background, you can still hear it with all this stuff happening in the track. And it doesn't need any processing. If you start to oversaturate this, it's not going to sound very good once you put it on a club system. Then we have this little effects. So this is one of my effects samples from my 50 Ultimate Essential Track effects. And so it's actually this. So this is like this sample. I put it through a delay pedal and it had like some rhythm. And then what I did is I took the audio of that here and chopped it up. And you can see there's that little like... So I just took that and I kind of like fit that into the groove. Like that little... It adds like some like rhythm and a bit more groove to it. Because you have all this stuff I showed you, like the kick, the hi-hats, the clap, the Rave loop, which are just steady over and over and over. And then this kind of pops in on top of that. And it's like a contrast to that, because you have some percussion which is constantly, and then some like this which comes in and out. And that's what really makes your beat feel full. Now, the other thing about this is the effects, right? Because this doesn't really just come from just putting the audio in there. This is another one of those things where you don't know exactly what you're going to get, but you know if you drop in this effect and it's got like some cool texture and it fits into the rhythm of the track like that, if you put some like delay and distortion on it and play around, you're going to find something cool, right? So that's what this is. Just a bit of quarter note delay and overdrive, plus this auto pan, which makes it sound like it's being sidechained. And then a high pass filter. And then the last drum we have is just this ride. So it's like a nice 909 ride, high pass filter, so it's not muddy. Pitched it down. And then there's this echo, which the secret to this, so a lot of times with the ride, people go, how do I get my ride to stand out? And why doesn't the ride sound like what you hear in these pro tracks? Well, big part of that is this echo here. And basically what this is doing is just making the ride kind of like wider, because a lot of what you hear in these tracks and why the ride kind of stands out is because they put all the percussion down the center, and then the ride is like a bit wider. Now, this is still going to work. Like if we converted this whole track to mono, you would still hear the ride. But even with it being converted to mono, just having this thing on there would put it in like a slightly different place in the mix. And that's what's going to make the ride work. 'Cause yeah, like if you turn this off, it kind of just... It can easily get lost. That's the secret. And it's just a very fast delay with the ping pong setting. So you're getting that stereo width without it being like this crazy delay that gets in the way. It's so fast that you don't really hear it. You just hear the stereo. And also you want to make sure the filter's up. Then I just have another auto pan like I showed you on that effects. And that's it for the drums. So then the first synth that we have here, we've got 3 main synths. And that's another thing. This track is very full. Almost even like too full in some places. Like this, I'd probably arrange this out as a full track so it's not all of this playing at once like it is here. But even so, it's only 3 synths. Like, so there's really not going to be that many synths, but you can do a lot with a little. So this is the lead. And what's happening here is this lead is kind of droning on with this one pattern, which is going up the scale, so it's going to sound very good in this key. We're in G minor. And then it sits really nicely on top of the bass line, which is playing more of a chord progression. Right, so it's like, again, saying a lot with a little. We have 2 elements here, but the way that they play off of each other, just harmonically, works so well that it's like, that's already so much happening there. You don't need to have like a million different background synths. So for the actual melody on this one, what's happening is it's in G minor. We're using the root note, the 9th, the minor 3rd, and the 5th, right? So it's only 4 notes from this scale. But you can see it's kind of like using these rhythmically. Like you walk up the scale, and then when these high notes hit, it's almost like you're like building up to that. Right? And then we end on the 9th there, so it kind of feels unresolved. And then over here you get that resolution. For the actual sound on this one, it's made using wavetable. It's just 2 saw waves. A saw wave and a square wave, detuned a little, low pass filter with an envelope on it to make it kind of plucky, noise unison, which gives it that nice, like more hard techno kind of evil texture. We've also got some echo and reverb going into an overdrive, which is blended on there, but that actually helps too for this, like just blending a little overdrive so that it's not overly distorted and it won't sound good, but it has like a little bit more crunch and more textures, so it kind of fits in with the style more. And then you can ignore that, but we just have this auto pan here again, making it sound sidechain. And then we have the bass. So you can see what's happening here is it's this pattern. So we're using, again, we're in G minor, so we're using our root note, our minor 3rd, our 4th, our 5th, right there, and then our 6th. So this has more notes than the melody, but what it does is you kind of have like this nicely resolving pattern, and it goes up here, and then it comes back down to the root note, and then the second time it walks up the scale even higher. So it's literally just like walking up the scale. But again, if you juxtapose this over the lead, which is playing notes that are in that same key, but kind of staying static while this is very dynamic, it's all going to fit together beautifully. And then if you have really good drums and you execute all of that stuff well, it can all fit together really nicely. So for the sound on this one, it's made with analog. It's a saw wave, detuned a bit, a low pass filter just turned down a little bit, some reverb actually to give it some texture. Since this isn't really like the low end, you know, like we have a rumble, this is really just like mid-range and low mid-range. We can put some reverb on there for texture, especially before this amp here that we have. It adds a nice thing to the bass. We have a high pass filter, so again, yeah, it's making this, like this isn't doing the bass. Like even if we play this with the rumble, you can hear 2 separate things, and that's what you want. If you're gonna have this plus a rumble kick, you gotta make sure that you can hear it and the rumble as 2 separate things like that, even in the whole entire mix, which you can hear. And then also what helps with that is the auto pan, again, just making it sound sidechained. And then the last layer that we have here is this pad. So again, this is kind of like the lead where it's staying pretty static, but then the bass is moving around it, and it sounds great. So what's happening here is we have G and D. So right off the bat, we have our root note and our 5th just droning on the bottom. And then up top, we're just using a bunch of notes in this key, basically, to just kind of like move around the scale and give the pad kind of like some progression. And really what's making it work is we have this drone down here that's staying steady. And then it's kind of like 2 melodies. We have this going on. which is a pretty nice little 3-note melody, plus this. And that's a nice little melody too. And when you put those together and they're kind of happening at different times a little bit, it's powerful, especially when it's sitting on top of that bass, just like with the lead. So you can see the pad's really not that hard if you know what you're doing in the scale. And for the sound on this one, it's made with operators. So it's actually this like digital FM pad here. We got some sine waves, detuned a little bit. They're all at different octaves, so you get this nice like kind of icy pad. I've got a low pass filter and actually a very, very fast LFO on the pitch of oscillator B and C and D, but we're not using D. So you're kind of getting like this buzziness like that. But the other thing about this sound, so there's some chorus and reverb, high pass, auto pan, sidechain, all of that. But what really makes this one work is more so like the sound that it is. Like this isn't just like we could have just gone and made like a big, you know, unison saw wave pad here, but it would clash with the bass. It wouldn't work. You need something that is going to be very different and just sound very different from not only the bass, but everything else in the mix. So to use this kind of like bright like digital pad like this, it goes really well over that bass. Again, compared to just like an obvious choice of like a unison saw wave super saw pad, that's gonna get kind of clashing with the bass. And if you have low notes in that, all of a sudden your bass is gonna clash with it. But this fits perfectly. And you know, you could talk about mixing all day, but if your sound from the start is designed around fitting with the other elements, you're not really going to need to do so much mixing, right? And yeah, so that's going to be it for this one, guys. I'll leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this entire template, all the synths, presets, samples, MIDI, and the project file. The whole arrangement is available right at the top of the description. Don't miss out, guys. It's just $5 for this awesome, really high quality template. It's something you can do right now, this moment, to take your tracks to the next level. Thank you so much for the support, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.